welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and roll your notifications to all so you don't miss any of the demonic content. Over the next 3 videos, we're going to cover a hot button idea, conspiratorial demonology. To my knowledge, this isn't a common term, and I first came across it in Jonathan Sawyer's excellent article, Unhidden from Self. While Sawyer is the first one who makes use of the term, he doesn't overly define it in his piece. Now, this isn't a criticism, it's very clear what he means within the context of the article. However, I think the term is useful to define outside of the article, both because there are more types of demonology than conspiratorial ones, and because the conspiratorial kind is so common in the US at the present moment. First, let's talk about what we mean by a conspiracy. The term conspiracy comes from the Latin word conspiro, which would literally mean to breathe together. The implication of the term is people sort of putting their heads in close and whispering, though it can also be used less threateningly to act in harmony together. When we refer to demonology, we're instead relying upon 2 Greek words, daimon and logos. In the original Greek context, daimones are messenger spirits, but we eventually come to use this word to represent the evil spirits that populate the New Testament material. Logos means word, but can be used more abstractly to refer to the study of something. Thus, for instance, biology, bios, life, logos, the study of life, or psychology, psyche, soul, and logos, the study of the soul or the study of the mind. Put them together, and we get the study of demons, or any systematic way to think about demons and their status as entities. Now, I'm still in the process of refining how I would define a conspiratorial demonology. As a result, if you have any comments on this one or any of the other videos, I'd love to hear them in the comments section below. Let's start with environmental ideas. That is, we don't find conspiratorial demonologies just in the contemporary United States, nor do we find them consistently throughout a particular geographic or historical band. For example, in England, we see influential conspiratorial demonologies periodically pop up, but they're not consistent or common elements of English history. So what makes these demonologies crop up and sometimes become overwhelmingly popular? Well, I would argue that a substantial factor in the rise of such demonologies, though not the only one, is the disruption of power dynamics. So think of every society as a balance between different forms of power and authority, or the capacity to force the world around us, either knowingly or unknowingly, into different forms. This power and authority can take a variety of different shapes. The billionaire exerts power and authority in a different way than, say, a member of Congress, than a charismatic megachurch pastor, than a beloved professional sports star, than the CEO of a massive nonprofit organization. Nevertheless, each of these individuals has the capacity to shape specific areas of the world around them via specific means, like money, persuasion, legal authority, etc. Likewise, people can band together to pool their power and authority to create a greater impact. Political parties, special interest groups, and community action organizations are all examples of this process. I would likewise argue that both on an individual and on a corporate or group level, we have images of how we think the world should be. Every pithy phrase, from "Make America Great Again" to "Believe Science" to "You Only Live Once," express ideas about how the world directly around us is supposed to look and how we're supposed to behave within it. And if it looks like that, well, then there's no problem. In fact, we could make a simplistic box diagram out of this idea. On the horizontal axis, we place world matches our expectation and world doesn't match our expectation. On the vertical axis, we could instead place has the power of change and lacks the power of change. We might note that 3 of these situations for a given community likely have fairly benign results. That is, if a community's worldview matches their expectations, and they either have or lack any kind of immediate power of change, well, it doesn't really matter. They're sitting pretty in the world that they want to see. If the community instead has a world that doesn't match their expectation, but they have the power to change, well, then they'll go about exerting their power and authority through normal channels to make the changes that they want. Where things get dicey is when people don't have the power to make changes in an unexpected or unanticipated world. There are a lot of responses that could occur here. Some communities might turtle up, drawing inward to create the world they want in miniature. Some communities will gradually shift their view of reality to something more accommodating to the current worldview. And some communities will attempt to isolate other avenues of power and authority and develop into something entirely new. Out of all the various options that we might see taken by such communities, only one of them is to engage in the creation of a conspiratorial demonology. What we'll see is that conspiratorial demonologies grant power and authority to the individuals who wield them by undercutting the normal channels that would grant such power and authority. In doing so, they set the world right without having to exert substantial effort on the part of the community itself, at least at first. Important thing to note here, this doesn't mean that the community that creates a conspiratorial demonology is aware of their role in its creation. And I in no way mean to imply that this creation is necessarily even conscious. Rather, the creation often occurs as an outgrowth of the community's efforts to understand why their worldview doesn't seem to align with the way the world appears to be. Let's take an example of this process that isn't immediately based upon demons, but maybe has an easier line of understanding: the idea of fake news. So from 2004 to 2015, searches for the term and topic remain relatively steady, according to Google Trends. However, as then candidate Trump began to enter more and more of the news, the term began to rise in popularity, with the topic following slightly behind the search term. What's happening? Well, a lot of things, and there are a ton of varied and interesting conclusions that we could come to. But what's one thing we might be able to conclude generally? Maybe that a significant subsection of America liked then candidate Trump and saw him as a significant good for the United States. By that time, web-based news was already being directed to a significant degree by algorithms on platforms like Twitter. Algorithms that slowly pared away content that would be unpleasing to the user and presenting them with material that they were more likely to engage with and consume for extended periods of time. This created what we have come to call echo chambers in popular discourse. These echo chambers created a particular worldview. Of course, you can't avoid differing opinions entirely. And when this worldview was presented to those outside the echo chamber, it became clear that it was not shared by everyone. Thus, the media consumers in this case became a community whose world doesn't match our expectation. In order to change the world to meet their expectations, this community would have needed to exert a power which presumably they did not have. For example, refuting partisan reporting or independently verifying facts, as given in a news report, would require an understanding of evidentiary rules. Considering there was a wide educational gap among white voters in the 2016 electorate, and college would often be the place to learn such rules, it may be that these voters did not have access to the kind of power and authority that they required to change the world to meet their expectations. Instead, this community adopted a different strategy. When this community was presented with negative news about candidate Trump, which in some cases, to be fair, was biased, they rejected it not just as a partisan interpretation of facts, but rather as lies that were constructed whole cloth, a conspiratorial idea that the mainstream media was trying to slander then President Trump was born. As a result, alternative news sources experienced a sudden surge, and this changed the informational landscape of the United States. Put another way, this community generated a conspiracy so that the world actually did meet their expectations. The example, then candidate and eventually President Trump was virtuous, thoughtful, and in many cases, sent from God to lead the nation. This also undercut the normal channels of authority. That is, the mainstream media took a significant hit to its authority and caused a shift in the United States. Eventually, this gains a demonic element when some evangelical Christians begin to associate fake news with the work of the demon Leviathan.